The knock came late. Not the casual knock of a neighbor borrowing sugar, not the uncertain tap of someone who might walk away if unanswered. This knock was firm, deliberate, and heavy with intention. It cut through the quiet of the apartment like a blade, sharp enough to make Daniel Harper stop mid-breath. He stood near the small dining table, one sock in his hand, the other already on his foot. The television murmured softly behind him, animated voices drifting through the room, though no one was really watching. On the couch, his daughter Lily slept curled on her side, her small fingers wrapped around the ear of a worn stuffed rabbit. Her chest rose and fell in a rhythm he knew by heart. That sound, her breathing, was the most comforting thing in his world. The knock came again. Daniel's heart tightened. No one ever came by this late. Not family, not friends. He didn't have many of either anymore. His life ran on routines. Work, school pickup, dinner, homework, bedtime. Unexpected things made him uneasy, especially when Lily was asleep. He glanced at her first, as he always did, making sure she hadn't stirred. She hadn't. Her face was peaceful, unaware of the quiet fear blooming in her father's chest. Daniel set the sock down slowly, as if sudden movement might somehow wake her, and walked toward the door. Every step felt heavier than the last. His mind raced through possibilities he didn't like, bad news, emergencies, mistakes he couldn't afford to have made. When he reached the door, he paused, took a breath, then opened it. Emily Carter stood in the hallway. For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. She looked almost the same as she did every day at the office, composed, elegant, controlled. Her dark coat was buttoned neatly, her posture straight, her expression carefully neutral. And yet something was different. The confidence she wore like armor seemed thinner tonight, as if the weight of it had finally begun to press down on her. "Daniel," she said. Her voice was calm, but not casual. "Miss Carter?" he replied, surprised by himself. "I'm sorry to come by so late. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." His instincts told him to keep the conversation brief, professional, at the door, but manners, habit, and a strange sense of inevitability pushed him aside as he stepped back. "Please, come in." She hesitated for half a second before crossing the threshold. Her eyes moved slowly around the apartment. Simple furniture, second-hand but clean, toys stacked neatly in a corner, a half-folded blanket draped over the couch. It was a home built on effort, not excess. Her gaze stopped on Lily. Something in Emily's expression softened just a fraction. "That's her?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "That's Lily. She's beautiful." He felt an unexpected warmth at the comment. "Yeah, she is." Emily removed her coat and draped it carefully over the back of a chair. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable, filled with words neither of them seemed ready to say. Daniel cleared his throat. "Is everything okay?" Emily clasped her hands together, then released them. "Daniel, I'm here as your boss." The sentence alone made his stomach tighten. "Yes," he said carefully. "I didn't want to bring work into your home, but after today I couldn't wait." A quiet hum filled his ears, the sound of anxiety rising. "Did I do something wrong?" Her answer came without hesitation. "No." The relief was brief. "I'm letting you go," she said. The words didn't register at first. They hovered in the air between them, unreal, as if they belonged to someone else's life. "I'm sorry?" he whispered. "You're fired," Emily said, softer this time. His chest tightened so suddenly he had to steady himself against the table. Thoughts crashed into each other. Rent due in 2 weeks, Lily's school tuition, the health insurance he couldn't lose, the fragile balance he maintained every single day. "I don't understand," he said. "My reviews are exceptional," she interrupted. "This has nothing to do with your performance." "Then why?" His voice shook despite his effort to stay composed. Emily's eyes flicked once more toward Lily. "Because you're better than the situation I put you in." Daniel stared at her, confusion giving way to something deeper,
something heavier. "I don't follow," he said. Emily sat down slowly, the weight she carried finally seeming to demand a place to rest. "I noticed you early on, not just your work, the way you spoke about your daughter, the way you never complained, the way you carried responsibility like it was part of who you were." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I crossed lines, quiet ones, emotional ones. I started hoping you'd notice things I was too afraid to say." He looked down at his hands. He had noticed, every time. He had just chosen not to acknowledge it. "I couldn't," he said quietly. "I can't afford mistakes." Emily nodded slowly. "And that's exactly why I'm here." She reached into her bag and placed an envelope on the table. 6 months severance, full benefits, a recommendation letter I personally wrote. Daniel stared at it. "You're firing me to protect me?" he asked. "You're letting me go," she corrected gently, "because you showed me what integrity looks like." Tears welled in her eyes, unashamed. "You chose your child. You chose decency. I chose emotion, and I have to live with that." The room fell silent again. Daniel felt the panic slowly give way to something else. Clarity. When Emily stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Daniel, never apologize for protecting what matters." Then she was gone. Daniel stood there long after the door closed, the envelope heavy in his hands, Lily's quiet breathing reminding him that even when things fall apart, somehow, love remains.
The apartment felt different after Emily left. Nothing had physically changed. The couch was still pressed against the wall. Lily's shoes were still lined up by the door. The faint hum of the refrigerator still filled the silence. But something invisible had shifted. A sense of finality lingered in the air, like the echo after a door closes and you realize it won't open again. Daniel stood in the living room for a long time, the envelope resting on the table where Emily had placed it. He didn't touch it right away. He couldn't. It felt too heavy, not just with paper, but with meaning, with endings. He finally sat down on the edge of the couch, careful not to disturb Lily. Her stuffed rabbit had slipped from her arms, dangling halfway to the floor. He gently lifted it back into place, tucking it under her chin the way she liked. "I'm here," he whispered, even though she was asleep. Those words had become a habit, a promise, one he repeated to her and to himself whenever life threatened to shake the ground beneath them. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling, memories drifting in despite his efforts to keep his thoughts still. 3 years ago, his life had looked very different. Back then, he was still learning how to be alone without being lonely. Lily had been 3, still asking for her mom at night, still crying when Daniel couldn't explain why promises had been broken. He'd taken the job at Carter Solutions out of necessity, not ambition. It was stable, it paid enough, it offered health insurance. Those were the things that mattered. Emily Carter had interviewed him herself. She'd been sharp, focused, her questions precise. She'd asked about his experience, his problem-solving skills, his ability to manage pressure. And then, near the end, she asked one question that had surprised him. "Do you have family?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I have a daughter." Emily had smiled then, not the polished corporate smile she wore in meetings, but something softer. "That must require a lot of discipline." He almost laughed. "It requires everything." She'd hired him the next day. At first, their relationship was simple, professional, respectful. Daniel kept his head down, worked hard, went home on time whenever Lily needed him. Emily noticed his reliability. She gave him more responsibility. He delivered, every time. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. She started asking about Lily more often, remembering her birthday, checking in when Daniel looked tired. Once, after a particularly late night, she'd brought him coffee and said, "You don't have to do everything alone, you know?" He smiled politely, thanked her, changed the subject. Not because he didn't appreciate the kindness, but because he understood himself.
He couldn't afford misunderstandings. He couldn't risk his job or Lily's sense of stability for something uncertain. So he stayed safe. He stayed professional. And now he was unemployed. Daniel exhaled slowly and reached for the envelope at last. He opened it carefully, as if sudden movement might make the reality sharper than it already was. Inside was exactly what Emily had promised: formal documents, a severance agreement, a benefit summary, and a neatly folded letter. Her handwriting was elegant, deliberate. He didn't read it yet. Instead, he folded everything back into the envelope and set it aside. There would be time for that later. Tonight, he needed to sleep. Lily needed him rested, strong. He turned off the lamp and lay down on the narrow bed in the adjoining room, staring into the darkness. Sleep came slowly. When morning arrived, it did so quietly. Pale light crept through the thin curtains, landing softly on the walls. Daniel woke up before his alarm, as he always did. For a moment, instinct took over. He reached for his phone to check emails, to mentally prepare for the day ahead. Then he remembered. There were no meetings today, no deadlines, no office waiting for him. The thought brought a sharp pang of anxiety, followed by something else: relief. He rose quietly and walked into the living room. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the couch, flipping through a picture book. "Morning, Daddy," she said brightly. "Morning, kiddo," he smiled, kneeling to her level. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded. "I dreamed about pancakes." He laughed softly. "That sounds like a good dream." "Are you going to work today?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Daniel took a breath. "Not today," he said. "We're going to have a different kind of day." Her eyes lit up. "Can we walk to school together?" He felt his chest tighten. "Yeah, we can." They moved through the morning slowly, pancakes sizzling on the stove, Lily humming as she colored at the table, sunlight warming the small kitchen. Daniel found himself noticing things he usually rushed past. The way Lily concentrated so deeply on her drawings, the way she smiled without reservation. On the walk to school, she reached for his hand. "I like when you're not in a hurry, you know?" So did he. After dropping her off, Daniel returned home and sat at the table again. This time, he opened Emily's letter. It was honest, thorough, glowing. She spoke of his dedication, his leadership, his character. She wrote about trust, about consistency, about values that couldn't be taught. By the time she finished, his eyes burned. That afternoon, the phone rang. Then it rang again. Former colleagues, clients, a recruiter who had heard impressive things, another who mentioned Emily Carter by name. Daniel answered politely, carefully. He didn't rush into anything. For the first time in years, he felt allowed to breathe. But beneath the calls and opportunities, another realization settled in. Emily hadn't just let him go to protect herself or the company. She had done it to protect his dignity. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel sat alone with his thoughts. He thought about Emily, about the loneliness she hid behind ambition, about the courage it must have taken to show up at his door and end something that had never been spoken out loud. He felt no anger, only understanding. Kindness, he realized, didn't always look like staying. Sometimes it looked like stepping away before something good became something harmful. As he turned off the lights and lay down beside the quiet certainty of his daughter's presence, Daniel felt something unfamiliar but welcome settle into his chest. Hope. Not the loud, reckless kind, the steady kind, the kind that grows slowly, rooted in humanity, waiting for the right moment to rise. Change didn't announce itself with fireworks or sudden clarity. It arrived quietly, in the spaces between Daniel's routines, in the moments where habit used to live and now didn't. The days after Emily's visit unfolded slowly, almost cautiously, as if life itself was waiting to see how he would respond. The first week passed in small adjustments.
Daniel still woke before sunrise, his body refusing to forget years of responsibility. He still packed Lily's lunch with the same care, cutting sandwiches just the way she liked and slipping in handwritten notes with uneven hearts drawn in the corner. But now, after walking her to school, he didn't rush back home to log in or check messages. Instead, he walked a little farther, letting the morning air fill his lungs. He noticed things. The bakery 2 blocks from the school that always smelled like warm bread. The elderly man who fed pigeons in the park every morning without fail. The way the city softened before the day truly began. These were moments he'd been moving too fast to see. At home, Daniel turned the dining table into a makeshift desk. He spread out his resume, updated it carefully, and read Emily's letter again, slowly this time. Each sentence felt like a hand on his shoulder, steady and sincere. It reminded him that his worth hadn't vanished with his job title. Calls continued to come. Some were polite inquiries. Others were eager, almost urgent. Emily Carter's name carried weight, and her words opened doors Daniel had never imagined knocking on. Still, he didn't say yes right away. For once, he allowed himself to choose instead of react. In the evenings, he cooked dinner without glancing at the clock. Lily helped, standing on a chair, carefully stirring pasta or sprinkling cheese with dramatic seriousness. "You smile more now," she said one night, her voice casual but observant. Daniel paused, surprised. "Do I?" She nodded. "Your eyes do." The comment stayed with him long after she went to bed. A week later, he received a message he hadn't expected. Emily Carter. He stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. "I hope you're doing well. I wanted to check in, not as your former boss, but as someone who respects you. No response needed." He read it twice, then a third time. There was no tension in the words, no regret, just quiet sincerity. Daniel typed a reply, erased it, then typed again. "We're doing okay. Thank you for everything." He didn't add more. He didn't need to. Life continued forward, steady and unremarkable in the best way. Daniel accepted a position with a smaller firm, less prestige but more flexibility. On his first day, he left the office at 4:30 without guilt. Lily's school play started at 5. He sat in the front row, heart full, applauding louder than anyone else as she waved at him from the stage, her smile searching until it found his. Later that night, as he tucked her into bed, she wrapped her arms around his neck. "I'm glad you're my daddy," she whispered. Daniel closed his eyes, emotion swelling in his chest. "I'm glad I get to be." After she fell asleep, he sat alone in the living room, the same couch, the same lamp, the same quiet. But it felt different now. Not fragile, not temporary, solid. He thought about Emily again, not with longing, not with confusion, but with gratitude. She had shown him that kindness sometimes required sacrifice, that selflessness didn't always come wrapped in comfort. Somewhere along the way, both of them had chosen humanity over desire, integrity over ease. And because of that, something beautiful had survived. Daniel stood and turned off the light, letting the darkness settle gently around him. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, with new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to choose what mattered. But tonight, he felt something rare and precious. Peace. The kind that comes not from having everything, but from knowing you protected what truly counted when it mattered most.